Today we're going to talk about percent problems. And first of all, that word percent actually means per 100. So every single percentage you see can actually be written as a fraction. 40% actually means 40 over 100. Now we always reduce our fractions. In this case, let's see, we've got a common factor of 10. So that gives me 4/10. And then I could divide the top and the bottom by 2. So 40% is the same thing as 2/5. So to write a percent as a fraction, you always take that percent. In example B, it's 22.5 and put it over 100. Now, how do we simplify something with a decimal? Well, we don't want to have decimals inside fractions, so we have to clear the decimal. In this case, that means we move the decimal one place to the right. And so I have to do the exact same thing to the denominator. I have to take the decimal, move it one place to the right, and that's going to add an extra 0 in the denominator. So this becomes 225 over 1,000. I can reduce this fraction as well. I can divide by 25. 225 divided by 25 is 9, and 1,000 divided by 25 is 40. I did that quickly by thinking about how many quarters are in 225 and $10, but you could also do that with long division. So 9 over 40 is my final answer here. Last one, 33 1/3% is 33 1/3 over 100. Now we don't want to have fractions within fractions, so I'm going to take that 33 1/3 and change it into an improper fraction. 33 times 3 is 99, plus 1 is 100. So I've got 100/3 over 100. That fraction bar means division. This is the same thing as 100/3 divided by 100. And if we want to divide fractions, we copy down the first, change to multiplication, flip the second. And now I can multiply straight across. The hundreds cancel out, and I'm left with 1/3. So 33 1/3% is the same thing as 1/3. Now every percent can be written as a decimal as well, because percent means divide by 100. Dividing by 100 means you take the decimal and you move it 2 places to the left. So there's the decimal. I move it 2 places to the left. 35% is the same thing as 0.35 or 35 hundredths. 4.2%, I take the decimal, I move it 2 places to the left. I'm going to have to put a 0 in there. So 4.2% is the same as 0.042. So to change a percent into a fraction, put it over 100. To change it into a decimal, you are dividing by 100, which means you're moving the decimal to the left 2 places. So let's put this all together and complete the following table. If we're given a percent and we want to change it into a decimal, we move the decimal 2 places to the left. So that would give me 0.60, or you could just write 0.6. As a fraction, we always put it over 100. And then we always reduce our fractions. I'll divide by 10 first. And then 6/10 I can divide the top and bottom by 2. And that gives me 3/5. Now if we're given a decimal and we want to convert that into a percent, we do the opposite. We take the decimal and we move it 2 places to the right. So that would give me 23.5%. And now I can take this percent and write it as a fraction. 23.5 over 100. Just like in the previous problem, I want to get rid of the decimal. I move it 1 place to the right, so I have to do the same thing to the bottom. And this becomes 235 divided by 1,000. I can divide the top and bottom by 5. 235 divided by 5 is 47. And 1,000 divided by 5 is 200. So 47 over 200. Now, if we're given a fraction and we want to change that into a decimal or a percent, I would start by changing that fraction into a decimal. To change a fraction into a decimal, you do the division. In this case, we have 4/5. That means 4 divided by 5. But 5 doesn't go into 4 at all, so we have to add a decimal, and we have to add a 0. 5 goes into 48 times. Oh, and there's no remainder, so I'm done. So 4/5 as a decimal would be 0.8. So now that I have this written as a decimal, to change it into a percent, I move the decimal 2 places to the right, and I get 80%. With the rest of this lesson, we're going to focus on solving percent problems, and we're going to learn two different methods. We're going to learn how to use an equation, and the equation is that the part always equals the percent times the total. And then after that, we're going to talk about how we can set up percent problems using proportions. So I'm going to start by showing you this equation method, and I'm going to show you this with an example. So the equation is, if you want to find a percent of something, you take that percent and you multiply it by the total, and that gives you part of the total. Now, to help with this method, there's a couple of keywords we might see. The equal sign, the word equal in math, is often denoted by the word is. So when we see the word is, it probably means the equal sign. And in percent problems, multiplication is indicated by the word of. So when we see the word of, that tells me that there's probably multiplication there. So I can actually set up each of these problems kind of word for word, just translating the words. Now, anytime you're putting percentages into equations, you always have to write that percentage as either a fraction or a decimal. When we use equations, I think it's going to be easiest to write the percentage as a decimal. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So part A says 40% of 65 is what number? So what they're actually asking you for is the part. That's what they're asking us for. But even if we don't recognize that in this problem, we can translate the words into an equation. 40% as a decimal would be 0.4. The word of means we're multiplying, and we're going to multiply by 65. The word is my equal sign, so then I put in an equal sign, and the what number is my unknown. That's going to be my x. So basically, I took my percent times my total, and that equals my part. So to finish this problem, I have to multiply 65 times 0.4, and I end up getting 26. So the answer is x equals 26. Let's do another one using the same method. So 4.5%, I'm going to change that into a fraction or a decimal. And in this case, I think it would be easiest to remember that 1/2 is the same as 0.5. So we've got 4.5%. As a decimal, that's 0.045. Of what number? So we multiply. Oh, the what number is the x. So this time we're taking the 0.45 times x. Is my equal sign, 45. So 0.045x equals 45. In this problem, we're actually finding the total. We're taking the percent times the unknown total, and they gave us the part. So to solve this equation, I have to divide by the 0.045. To divide by a decimal, you have to clear the decimal. So I have to move it 1, 2, 3 places to the right. I have to do the same thing in the numerator. So I'm going to have to put 3 zeros in there. And I get 45,000 divided by 45. And that is going to be 1,000. Last example using this method. So now we're solving for the percent. What percent is my unknown? So I'm going to put in the x. Of means I multiply, so times 80 equals, that's the is, 88. We could also write this as 80x equals 88. So this time we're solving for the percent. To solve, I would divide both sides by 80. To help me with the division, I'm going to reduce. I have a common factor of 8, and that becomes 11/10. And then because I'm writing my answer as a percentage, I think I'm going to change this into a decimal. Dividing by 10 is the same thing as moving the decimal one place to the left. And so I get 1.1. Now, this is actually my percent written as a decimal. To convert this into a percentage, I have to take that decimal and move it 2 places to the right. And so my final answer here is actually 110%. I get more than 100% in this problem because the total was 80 and the part was 88. So the part is actually bigger than the total, and that's why I'm getting an answer that's bigger than 100%. Now there's a second method you can use to solve percent problems, and that's the proportion method. you can set up the following proportion for each one of these percent problems. So you always put the percent, and you don't change it into a decimal, over 100. So you're basically writing the percent as a fraction, and you're saying that that equals the ratio of the part to the total. So in this problem, what number is 18% of 105? The 105 is the total. And in fact, the total is always after the word of. So the 105 is the total. We know the percentage, so we must be trying to find the part. So as a proportion, this would be 18 is my percent, over 100, always over 100. I don't know the part, that's the x, and the total is 105. We learned in the previous lesson that we can solve proportions by cross-multiplying. 100 times x has to equal 18 times 105, or 100x equals 1890. To finish, I'm going to divide both sides by 100. Dividing by 100 moves the decimal 2 places to the left, so x is 18.9. Let's do one more example with a proportion. 8% of what number is 1.2? So the 8%, the 8 goes over 100, and then I have to figure out what am I solving for and what are they giving me? Of what number? The total is always after the of. So in this problem, I don't know the total. 8% of what number? The unknown is the total, and the 1.2 is the part. So once again, when we have a proportion, we can solve by cross-multiplying. 8 times x has to equal 1.2 times 100. Multiplying by 100 always takes that decimal and moves it 2 places to the right. So 8x equals 120. And then I'm going to divide by 8. And 120 divided by 8 is 15. And so that's it. My final answer is x is 15. 1.2 is 8% of 15. That's it for this lesson. As always, let me know if you have any questions.